if Dallas, pays him, who are they potentially losing out on? Do you lose out on Jalen Smith in a couple of years? Do you pay the position, or do you just, draft and put another young guy in there?
It's not about how good or bad Dak Prescott is. It's about how unrealistic it is to pay quarterbacks 15% of the total salary cap and still expect to win championships. Today is Friday, February 15th. This is the Cowboys Beat on CLNS Media. I'm Ari Temkin along with Patrick Conn. It's the Cowboys Beat with Ari and Conn. And even though it's the off season, we are loaded up today because one of the main talking points throughout this week, and certainly for a long time, but maybe more so this week, is about the future of Dak Prescott, which is a major, major talking point. And should the Cowboys sign him to an extension? Should they wait until next season and give him sort of a prove it in the final year of his rookie contract? Look, I think what's interesting is, there's all these opinions, Patrick, about how good or bad Dak Prescott is as a quarterback, and how that relates to whether or not they should give him an extension. And I guess the thing that stands out to me is, like, I'm not really here to argue that Dak is good or bad. I mean, I think he proved this past season he's pretty good. I mean, I don't know if where you'd put him. For me, he's probably, he's not top 10, but he's top 15. So he's probably between 11 and 15 in the NFL with room for growth, right? Like, he could certainly grow. So I don't have any questions about his physical traits. I don't have any questions about how good he is. I mean, I think he's a really good quarterback for a fourth round pick. I think he's a top 15 quarterback. It's very difficult to get those kinds of guys. But I just think the economic reality of the modern NFL, it's very, very difficult to pay Dak Prescott like a top 5 quarterback, because that's the kind of money that he's going to command in an extension.
Yeah, I've said for a while now, I was saying, 27 and a half, 28 per season. And maybe they're going to pay him, if they pay him top 5, it's going to be closer to 30, if not more. And with the growing salary cap, maybe it's more attainable than in years past, but still, you're talking about a guy he's really good in clutch moments. But there's this good Prescott, bad Prescott. Which one are you going to get? Thing that you got to worry about. But like you said, he's young. He's got room for growth. He has all these things. But when you look at how the NFL is today, is paying him the right move? And that's where I struggle in the pay Dak Prescott versus wait. I don't know. I mean, I think he should play on his rookie deal all the way through, just because of the things that we've looked at in the past about how much a quarterback eats of your contract or your total salary cap, and it can hamstring you as far as being able to bring in other assets. And as we know, the Cowboys have some holes that need to be filled, and I know we got free agency coming up, and we have the NFL draft coming up, so there's going to be things where they can, make some changes to the roster to really help him out. But is it the right move to pay him $30 million a season before the end of his rookie contract? I don't think so. I don't think it's the right move.
Why do you not think it's the right move?
The reason why is because we know that let's look at Seattle, for instance. They did well with their team when Russell Wilson was on a rookie deal. Won a Super Bowl, went to another Super Bowl. And then they paid him, and then all those big name players that they had, they had to figure out who to pay, who not to pay. And they've kind of slipped a little. I mean, they're still competitive, but they're not what they were. So it makes you think, well, if Dallas, pays him, who are they potentially losing out on? Do you lose out on Jalen Smith in a couple of years? You have all these big name players that you may lose out on Well, we don't know about Ezekiel Elliott because obviously the NFL has their own views on the position itself. Do you pay the position, or do you just draft and put another young guy in there? So there's that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's kind of as simple as it's not about whether or not you think Dak Prescott is good or Dak Prescott is bad or worthy of $30 million or $25 million, because the open market dictates that he's worth whatever teams are willing to pay him, and teams in the open market would be willing to pay him between 25 and 30 million. That's the going rate. I mean, what did Kirk Cousins get? And Dak is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. I think the question here, it's not about how good or bad Dak Prescott is. It's about how unrealistic it is to pay quarterbacks 15% of the total salary cap and still expect to win championships. It doesn't. There's an issue. There is a market inefficiency at the quarterback position in the modern NFL. And I mean, you have a stat that backs this up, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the highest paid quarterback in the league. He made $33 million last year, which is 18% of the $177 million salary cap. If Aaron Rodgers isn't worth 18% of the salary cap, and history says he's not, then that should tell you all you need to know. There's an issue in terms of paying quarterbacks the going rate relative to what the salary cap is, and you can't win that way. You cannot win that way.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, not including this year's Super Bowl, there has been one quarterback Super Bowl winner in the last 12 years that exceeded 12% of the salary cap and still were able to win a Super Bowl. And you're talking about Peyton Manning in 2013, 2012? I can't, maybe it's 20. No, that's not right. Well, anyway, I don't know the year, but with Peyton Manning and the Broncos, he was 12%.
Wow.
Okay. I think it was 12.5% of the salary cap. This year, so you could add Brady to that. Okay. So 2 of the last 13 Super Bowl winners made more than 12% of the contract, and he was at, what did we figure, at 15%?
15%.
Yeah, because he had $27 million was his contract cap hit. A base and plus all his bonuses. So you're talking about, I mean, you figure Dak Prescott at $30 million is roughly what, 16%?
Yeah. The cap is expected to be at about $191 million next season. So yeah.
Right.
30 million of $191 million cap is 15.7% of the cap.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at that argument there, and it's like, quarterbacks who win the Super Bowl don't make more than, 12% unless you're, Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, only 2 of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game.
Right, and Brady's, that's a high percentage for Brady relative to what he's been getting paid, on an annual basis. And I think, so you might be listening to this thinking, well, what do you do, right? Like, what are you supposed to do if you have a pretty good quarterback? I mean, you have what I would consider to be a franchise type quarterback at Dak Prescott. So what are you supposed to do? You let him walk? And I think the answer is, yeah, probably you do. You probably have to look at the 2020 draft. You take a quarterback at the first round of the 2020 draft. You then get 5 years on a rookie contract, and you try to make it work in that 5-year window. And, you either the next CBA or some other component has to come in that sort of corrects this market inefficiency. But it's clear as day. Only 2 quarterbacks in the last 13 seasons have gotten more than 12% of the salary cap and won a Super Bowl. So, I mean, you look at what 12% of the cap is at next season, and I mean, you're talking about a rate that a lot of quarterbacks are getting paid. So and look, 12% could be considered an arbitrary number, but I think, it's difficult to build a roster that's championship caliber under those confines of a hard cap. You just have to basically be perfect in the draft, and even then, who knows? You have to be able to take advantage when you have a quarterback that's on a controlled deal that is not going to be making 12% of the cap.
Right. You're talking about 12% of the cap is $22 million and some change, maybe 23. Okay. Dak Prescott's not paying for 23. He's not going to play for the Cowboys for $23 million. Because there's no way that Condon, I think, is his agent, CAA Sports, or whatever I think they used to represent Tony Romo. There's no way that they're going to go in and say, yeah, we'll play for 23 when they're going to look at all of his numbers and how he does in the clutch. And, you know, he had more game-winning drives, more fourth-quarter comebacks than anybody since he stepped foot on the field. He's not playing for 23 a year in Dallas. You know, so, it's a difficult thing. Another thing is, you draft one in 2020. Well, there's some pretty big names that are supposed to be coming out that year.
Right.
You got Jake Fromm. You got Tua. I mean, there's going to be some guys there. There's some other names that eventually we'll get into. The kid from Oregon who was looked at as the number one name this year and didn't even come out.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, there's going to be some guys there, but, I mean, at that point, do you franchise Dak Prescott, make him play a year while you're trying to mold your rookie? I mean, there's so many different things you can do, but I think ultimately he gets paid. So gets the money that he wants. It's just conventional wisdom, or to what we think would be conventional wisdom, is you don't pay the quarterback because you're not going to win the Super Bowl if he's making more than 12% of your salary cap, which most quarterbacks in the NFL do.
Right. No, I mean, again, it's a market inefficiency. I mean, you've basically got a bunch of teams that once you find a franchise quarterback, I mean, the hardest thing to do in the NFL is to find a franchise quarterback. Basically what we're saying is, well, you found one, but now you can't pay him. Because, I mean, nobody's basically worth the money they're going to get. I mean, again, the history suggests that Aaron Rodgers, who is the best, I mean, talent-wise, the best quarterback in the NFL, isn't worth 18% of the cap. And that's incredible. If anybody should be worth that money, it's Aaron Rodgers, but history suggests they can't win a Super Bowl with him making that high a percentage of the cap. Now there was Brady. There was Peyton Manning, so I guess there's exceptions, but you basically, from a personnel standpoint, have to be perfect everywhere else. You can't take gambles and lose in free agency. You have to draft exceedingly well. It's very, very difficult to maneuver the hard cap, pay a franchise quarterback the going rate, and win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, the year that Aaron Rodgers won the Super Bowl, do you know what percentage of the cap he was?
He was on his rookie deal, wasn't he?
I believe he was, or maybe because it was 6.5%. He was making
6.5%,
$7 million that season, almost $8 million. It was like $7.75 million per season. So that's what he was making that year that he won the Super Bowl.
So what do you think it is? Is it just as simple as to say that there's just not enough salary cap space to go around for the rest of the positions? You think it's just that simple?
I mean, I think there's something to that. Because, you know, you have to skimp on certain position groups, or you have to go light areas, as far as, you know, I mean, I look at it like this. You got to pay your top five, and then you just work around that, you know, where they're, you know, you got your quarterback, your left tackle, your defensive end, your cornerback, and there's one more, wide receiver. But history also says that you don't need a big-time money wide receiver to win the Super Bowl either. So if you skimp out on your quarterback and your wide receiver, so you're basically paying for three positions. As far as the big money contract ones go, I don't know what the solution is, other than a much higher salary cap.
That or some sort of a luxury tax, you know, not a hard cap.
Yeah, well, I think, but the problem is there. I mean, you can't really, because I think it's going to go like this. You go, well, we'll go with the higher cap, but that just means your quarterbacks can get paid even more.
Right.
Because the agent's going to come in and go, well, you got a higher cap now, give us more money. So I don't know that. But
I do think even in that regard, like, you get smarter teams that say you're not worth that. We'll go and sign somebody, or we'll go and draft somebody, and then, you know, even though that guy might leave and get, you know, 40, 50 billion, whatever it is, you know, that's one of those things that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, it's still, even if, you know, it inflates the value of quarterbacks, the amount of money they'd make, I think teams would still make potentially smart decisions in terms of those types of
Yeah,
guys.
and I think you kind of look at the Kansas City thing. They had Alex Smith, who they traded for several years after, or the year after he took his team, helped take his team to the Super Bowl. He goes there, and then so they bring in Mahomes, so they ship him out. Smart move. You're cutting money off the books, and you're going with a quarterback on a rookie deal, and all he did was light up the season. And I think it has something to do with the fact that quarterbacks seem to be more advanced now than they were in years past. And I think that has a lot to do with how the high school systems are now and how the college systems are. So they're teaching more advanced stuff nowadays than they
7-on-7 too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have all those Elite 11 camps that, Trent Dilfer was doing, and they have the Manning passing academies.
Right.
So there's just so much more out there now, so they're more advanced. So I think the idea of going with a youngster is more attractive than maybe it was in years past. Because even like when they drafted Rodgers, or even Eli Manning when he was drafted. I mean, you talk about a 2-time Super Bowl winner, and he was behind Kurt Warner. And Rodgers was behind Favre. So I think there's something to it. Bringing in a young guy. And I'm not saying Dallas should look at a quarterback in this draft, obviously, without a first-round pick. We've talked about this in the past. Without a first-round pick, you're not finding a starting quarterback 9 times out of 10. Cowboys got lucky that Dak Prescott fell into their lap.
And I guess the reason they weren't really able to take advantage of the ridiculously cheap contract that Dak's had for the last 4 years is because they were paying Tony Romo so much damn money that's finally up after this season.
Yeah, that's a portion of it. I mean, and they were the last few years really, when you look at the cap, they had money on the books that they were paying that they weren't playing because they were trying to move in this direction where they would, could get younger and those sort of things. And they're going to have to continue to make those types of moves. Like a Sean Lee who's saying he's going to come back. Well, not for that amount of money, you're not. As far as what I'm looking at, I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, they got to go with the younger guys. I mean, this team is one of the youngest in the NFL, so they're still in that move. They're still in that win now mode. As far as usually a team this young is, trying that rebuilding, but Dallas proved that with a young roster they can compete. So I'm thinking maybe that's another reason why the Cowboys feel like they can pay Dak Prescott that amount of money and lead them to a Super Bowl. But history says unless you're one of the top 3 quarterbacks of all time, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, the other part to this too is you wonder if the Cowboys look and say, hey, we're going to give him X, and it might look like a big number, but they can kind of do what they did over the years with Romo, which is, every year front load some of that signing bonus, so take some of the, the total cap hit off and kind of kick the can down the road, which, helps to, minimize the cost on an annual basis, but at some point you're going to be swallowing that significant pill. I think what I would do is, unless Dak is taking a humongous step forward after next season, I mean, I'm going to draft a quarterback at the first round of the 2020 draft. You mentioned it's a loaded draft, and either franchise tag Dak in 2020 or let him walk and go with a rookie in 2020, and just again get on that treadmill of cheap contracts for rookie quarterbacks, because that's how you win. That's how you win with a salary cap. But my guess is, and I wonder what your thought on this is, they're going to extend Dak Prescott maybe this offseason, probably this offseason, and he's going to make north of 25, south of 30, maybe 30.
Yeah, I think it's a done deal. I think that he gets his money this offseason. Not that like I said, we, rambled on about it for, 20 minutes now, but,
right. It's not what you think, it's not what you want or think is prudent. Right.
Right. I just think when you look at everything and the reports that come out and, how this team operates, it seems like Dak's going to get paid. The guy that should get paid first, obviously, is DeMarcus Lawrence. Right. But, you know how the quarterback thing is. They're always the most popular guy. So, it is what it is. But hopefully they wait a year. It's interesting, and just this little caveat here that I think is interesting. Jason Garrett and Dak Prescott are going into the final years of their deal together, is there a chance that neither one of them return?
I'd say pretty likely that Garrett doesn't, and probably pretty unlikely that that Dak doesn't. I mean, I would assume. I mean, we've heard time and time again that Cowboys want Dak Prescott to be a Cowboy for a long time, and not just from Jerry. We've heard from the real decision maker, Stephen Jones, as well. All right, Ari Temkin, Patrick Conn. This is the Cowboys Beat on CLNS Media. Patrick, you've been knee-deep in tight end discussions and looking at film, and we've talked a lot about the tight end position throughout the last couple of weeks of this podcast. Mm-hmm. So here's my question to you. One, is there a tight end that's worth moving up for? And two, could the Cowboys move up in the draft for said tight end, a Hockenson or a Fant?
There's three guys that I would move up for.
Hockenson, Fant, and Irv Smith?
Irv Smith. Man, that guy is dynamic.
Alabama tight end.
Fant...
Other two are Iowa tight ends. Sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I would say Fant's my favorite out of all the tight ends in this class. I haven't talked much about him because Dallas got no shot at him. He's top 20 talent. I've said this time and time again. That's a top 20 talent. He is a guy who can really challenge defenses. I don't think that they could trade up for him. I think they could trade up for Hockenson because I think he's late first round, maybe early second.
Interesting.
But again, I don't know how other teams are going to be valuing that position because they're seeing guys like Selleck and what Ertz is doing, and they want that type of target.
Kittle.
Yeah, Kittle guy that Dallas should have taken.
Yep.
Instead, they took the kid that they didn't really want and traded him away for nothing. Of course, I'm talking about Ryan Switzer.
Yeah.
So
you think there's two tight ends that will go in the first round?
I think there's possibly three. I think Irv Smith could go in the first round. He's not the elite level receiver that the other two are. He's an elite level blocker. And if you play at Alabama, you better be able to block. Especially if you're a wide receiver or tight end. And he has it. I mean, whistle to whistle, that boy's blocking. And he has some moves as a receiver. He's very well-rounded. There's some things in there that the big question you're going to have is the limited production. But you're talking about a guy who catches a touchdown pass, caught a touchdown pass at Alabama every 7 passes. I'm going to take that every time.
Yeah.
I think it was every 7. Not passes, actual receptions.
What would it take to trade up, to trade into the first round? Because remember, the Cowboys are not just sitting on only a second-round pick. I mean, it's a late second-round pick.
Right, yeah. I think he'd have to fall into day 2 before they would make that kind of move.
So they can't get back into the first round. The only way is they might have to give up next year's first to do it.
Oh, they're going to absolutely have to give up next year's first to get back into the first round. I mean, that's the only way it's going to happen. But I'm saying if one of those guys, and like I've said time and time again, the NFL draft, it's a crapshoot. You never know which players, because happens every year. You're looking at a player and you're going, that guy's top 10 lock. Next thing you know, it's pick 31 and that guy's still sitting in the green room.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, I know we talked about him earlier, but go back to talking about Aaron Rodgers. Everybody thought that guy was a top 10 guy. And there he just kept sliding. So guys like that, it happens, And so when I look at like an Irv Smith or maybe Hockenson, I could see those guys sliding out a little bit, especially if a quarterback needy team, quarterbacks overdrafted, maybe a Denver or somebody, takes a guy in the early first round and then they try to jump back in because they want to grab that quarterback in that first round so they get that 5 years. Well, maybe not Denver because, they're trading for Flacco. Great move, John Elway. But, so there's so many things that can happen. There's going to be good offensive linemen. Dane Brugler's saying there's a lot of good ones there. So there's deep in many positions. So there's a possibility those positions, maybe they're not valued by other teams as much. And maybe that can help the Dallas Cowboys out and it'll fall right to them. And they can get a guy like Hawkinson or Irv Smith. But I think Irv Smith I think he's a better blocker than Hawkinson, but Hawkinson's the better receiver. The more experienced receiver, just because of the fact that Irv Smith only really played one season because he was playing behind O.J. Howard, which he wasn't going to get time over him.
Right.
Another top-level talent. And Alabama, that's a factory. They produce quality talent year in and year out. So the guy can play. He's going to have, obviously the Cowboys organization is going to give Saban a call and get all the information they need on him. But he's a guy that I think that they could do that for. I mean, there's other guys that they don't necessarily have to. There's a Caden Smith. There's Caleb Wilson. The kid out of Utah State, Dax Raymond. Really like him. Really good player. I know you asked me about him. I think it was last week.
Right.
Yeah, he's another guy that if they can't trade up to get one of those top three, I have no problem with Dax Raymond. He really showed out in the Senior Bowl. He put on, what limited tape he had was very impressive. The problem being is that he played in an offense that had plenty of playmakers, so he wasn't the focal point, so he didn't get, a ton of passes going his way. But he showed me something at the Senior Bowl and what I saw of him. He can make the plays. He's a good blocker. He can make moves out in space. And that's another thing I've loved about Irv Smith. Yards after the catch. This guy can make moves and shake safeties. And a tight end, that's big time.
All right, so real quick before the end of the podcast today, there's been a lot of news this week about Earl Thomas. The news being he's in Austin, which that's where he goes and spends most of the off season. I don't know, he was looking for a school for his kids. I mean, that has no bearing whatsoever on where he's going to play. I mean, Austin, if you don't know, is about 2.5 hours from Dallas without traffic. So, I mean, it's not as if, he's moving to Austin, therefore he's going to play for the Cowboys, right? But there's obvious.
I was going to say, it's absolutely what it means. He's going to be a Cowboy.
It's just a nice little 2.5 hour commute down 35 every day, up 35 every day.
I mean, Sean Payton lives in Southlake, and he's absolutely going to be the Cowboys coach.
Well, at least Southlake is in Dallas.
Oh, wait, he's lived there for years. Never mind.
But, I mean, there's obviously interest in Earl. There was last year. The Cowboys tried to trade a second-round pick and then pulled that back when they realized they wanted to take Connor Williams instead. So what's your ceiling on an average salary for him?
Honestly, I don't know what you would pay that guy, dude.
Yeah.
I don't even know what his salary was last year. I stopped looking at it.
So he's 30.
Right. Coming off fractured leg.
He played in 16 games, 6 consecutive seasons to start his career. Then he played in 11, 14, and 4 in the last 3 seasons. So he's missed a ton of games the last 3 years. And at his age, there's clearly, that doesn't seem to be an anomaly. So there's an obvious risk. And the Cowboys, historically haven't paid, especially in recent history, for guys at that part of their careers. But look, we both said it. I'll continue to say it. He's a ball hawking safety. He's a playmaker. He's exactly what the Cowboys don't have, which is a guy that creates and manufactures turnovers. He's Johnny on the spot every single time. There's a reason, he's always finds himself in the right spots for balls bad in the air to intercept them. You look at the 2 interceptions he had against the Cowboys this past year. Just Johnny on the spot all the time. So there's a pretty high risk and probably pretty high likelihood that he won't be available for 16 games. But even with that, I still want to take the risk and bring him in.
I'll give him 3 years at $27 million.
I might go a little bit higher than that.
The only reason I went 3 for 27 is he made 8.5 last year.
Right. And oh wow, really? Wow. So yeah, 9 wouldn't be too. 9 wouldn't be too bad. And plus, I mean, you look at historically that position and what those guys command in the open market at 30 years old. 9 would be 9 would be fairly significant. All right, that's Patrick Conn. I'm Ari Temkin. This is the Cowboys Beat. Make sure to follow Patrick on Twitter at @DraftCowboys and check out all the fantastic work he's doing in breaking down potential picks, tight end position, all that stuff at DraftCowboys or WFAA.com. I'm Ari Temkin on Twitter at Ari Sports. You can catch me every day, 12 noon, streaming live on Phantom at facebook.com/watch Phantom. And of course, make sure to tell your friends, hit that subscribe button here on the podcast. Make sure to give us a rating too. Ratings always help. But for now, for this week, we are out. Peace.